Arsenal get transfer green light to sign £30 million striker for a free this summer. Arsenal could be about to get another chance to sign Juventus striker Dusan Vlahovic this summer. Dusan Vlahovic has been unable to reach terms on a new contract with Juventus, meaning the former Arsenal target will become available as a free agent. The Serbia international has been at the club for just over 4 years, but according to Gazzetta Sport, significant differences over wage expectations have resulted in the two parties going their separate ways. Vlahovic first made his reputation at Fiorentina, with those displays convincing Juventus to bring the striker to Turin. Having scored 41 goals in a season and a half, speculation linked him with a switch to the Emirates Stadium in January 2022, though he ultimately stayed in Syria. Sky Sports reported at the time that Arsenal were deterred by the substantial transfer fee, which proved to be the main obstacle. He eventually completed a £66 million move. Vlahovic was also eager to join a Champions League club, and at that point the Gunners hadn't featured in the competition the 4 seasons preceding that window, while Juventus were regular participants. Transfermarkt currently value Vlahovic of €35 million, £30 million, but the striker looks set to leave the club as a free agent at the end of the month. Arsenal, coming off the back of winning the Premier League, are poised to strengthen their squad further, and Vlahovic was a player they pursued during the earlier stages of the Mikel Arteta era. Previously, Juventus manager Luciano Spalletti, who took charge midway through the campaign, had expressed his desire to keep the 26-year-old and had hoped his bosses and the striker would come to an agreement. "We've suffered the loss of Vlahovic like the bread and butter," he said. "You can't play football without someone with his characteristics, without a strong, physical threat who scores goals." The renewal. "From what I know, the club has attempted to make contact of this kind and will try again, because that's what they tell me, and I trust my directors." Vlahovic has only lifted a solitary Coppa Italia during his spell at the club, who were once the powerhouse of Italian football. Since his arrival, the striker netted 68 times in 168 appearances and was recognised as Serie A's finest striker in 2024. Arsenal invested £64 million to bring in Viktor Gyökeres 12 months ago, and the Sweden international found the net 21 times in his debut campaign. In crucial matches, including the Champions League final, Gyökeres found himself among the substitutes, with Kai Havertz getting selected in the starting lineup. It remains to be seen what Arsenal plan to do in the transfer market this summer, with some suggestions they could look to sign a new winger and a centre-forward. Arsenal can finally land long-time Mikel Arteta target, and it won't cost them a penny. Arsenal were heavily linked with Dusan Vlahovic early in Mikel Arteta's tenure before he chose to sign for Juventus, but the Serbian is again on the market after his contract expired. Dusan Vlahovic has failed to agree a new deal with Juventus, and the former Arsenal target will now be on the market for nothing. The Serbian has spent just over 4 years in Turin, but the two parties have been some way apart in their salary expectations, which has led to them parting ways, reports Gazzetta Sport. Vlahovic initially made his name at Fiorentina, and it was those performances that tempted Juventus into signing the Serbian. He had notched 41 times in a season and a half, which led to talk of a move to the Emirates in January 2022, but he ultimately remained in Syria. Sky Sports reported at the time that Arsenal were put off by the hefty transfer fee that ultimately proved a stumbling block. He eventually moved for £66 million. Vlahovic was also keen to play for a Champions League club, and at the time the Gunners hadn't qualified for in the 4 seasons leading up to that window, whilst Juventus were regulars. Arsenal, fresh off winning the Premier League, are set to add more quality to their squad, and Vlahovic was a player they wanted earlier in the Mikel Arteta era. Previously, Juventus boss Luciano Spalletti, who arrived midway through the campaign, had made it known that he wanted to retain the 26-year-old and had hoped his superiors and the striker would reach an agreement. "We've suffered the loss of Vlahovic like the bread and butter," he said. "You can't play football without someone with his characteristics, without a strong, physical threat who scores goals." The renewal. "From what I know, the club has attempted to make contact of this kind and will try again, because that's what they tell me, and I trust my directors." Vlahovic was not the prolific striker that Juventus had been seeking, and the striker has only claimed a solitary Coppa Italia during his time at the club, who were once the dominant force in Italy. Following his arrival, the Serbian scored 68 times in 168 outings and was named the best striker in Serie A in 2024. Arsenal did spend £64 million to sign Viktor Gyökeres 12 months ago, and the Swede scored more than 20 times in his debut season, but did not entirely convince. In crunch games, including the Champions League final, he found himself on the bench with Kai Havertz preferred. The manner in which the Gunners lost to PSG at the weekend shone a light on their shortcomings in the final third, and, following their champion year, there is an expectation that Arteta will dip into the market to add even more quality in attack as Arsenal look to seize the initiative.